Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I really do want to thank everybody that came here and spoke tonight. 300 people came in and politely, sincerely, passionately said what they had to say, and at the same time, the whole time, were respectful. I tried to listen to everything that was being said, and I appreciate the fact that people came and were engaged. But as Councilor McGovern said, you would know it from tonight's testimony, we certainly got lots of emails on both sides of the issue. And, I know I'm going to take criticism, and I've been criticized for this. I do care about safety. I do want us to move forward with improved cycling safety, separated bike lanes for everybody. But I also want to do it in such a way that we are making that transformation so that residents in the impacted areas and the businesses can actually make that adjustment. I mean, there's some businesses that need to decide whether to renew their leases or not because they're not sure whether they can make it in this. Now, people can say, well, okay, they'll move on, and that's fine. But they need the opportunity to make those decisions, and I think giving them a little more time to make that decision is going to be helpful. And there are a lot of residents. I know Cambridge Street. I have not ridden a bicycle on Cambridge Street since I was probably 20 years old. So I'm sure things have changed in that time. But at the same time, I think we need to look at all of our options and provide the residents of East Cambridge, Broadway, some of our densest neighborhoods with time to figure out how to make the change going forward. So, we never called for a ban. We never called for a delay. We were asking for an extension of time to do this right, and that's my goal in moving forward with this. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I yield.
Thank you. Councillor Toner yields the floor. Councillor Nolan, floor is yours.
Thank you. I have a long statement because I've spent, like all of us, a lot of time on this, and it's torn me up. I understand, hear, and honor the passion of those who see this proposal as a dangerous precedent that delays needed infrastructure. I understand, hear, and honor the passion of those who feel left out of our decision as a city to transform the city into one that no longer prioritizes cars and seeks to consciously limit the use of cars on our public ways. We have embarked on a transition to end reliance on cars and shift current infrastructure that encourages us to depend on them. The shift is part of a process of undoing the past 70 years of prioritizing cars. It's a big change and a necessary change. As challenging as the changes have been and will be for some, the CSO does make our city a safer, more environmentally friendly place to live and work. I will say I do not see this proposal as an apocalyptic change. It would add timeline flexibility. It is neither a ban or a stop to installations. It is a deadline adjustment to the first of its kind ordinance, which probably should have included this timeline in the original. It would add flexibility that allows Cambridge Street, Broadway, and Main to be sequenced and completed in consecutive years. The city memo, I appreciate all the time the staff has put into this, lays out a plan with installation on the first section of Cambridge Street done next year by fall of 2025. That will start in this term. What isn't included in the memo is the construction project on Mass Ave this year, which is absorbing significant resources, staff time, and will have a broad effect on construction-related congestion in the city. And that segment in our work on Mass Ave is monumental and will be an important addition to our bike lane network. Also, what isn't in the memo is the fact that the city was supposed to convene a Cambridge Street working group in 2021 that has yet to be convened. The Mass Ave 4 working group shows that properly done, the community can work together on these controversial installations and do them better for the community. We need a working group for Cambridge Street to get it right. And to clarify for all, work, the city staff has assured me, will not stop on bike lane mileage. Work is underway this year. It will continue into next year. This amendment will do nothing to change the required mileage in this CSO. Now, the first separated bike lane in the city was, I believe, along Concord Ave in 1998, between the Alewife Rotary and the Belmont line. I used that bike lane. My kids were in childcare, and we got a Burley trailer, and we made many a trip along that path. And it was not an easy effort to get that bike lane. That was 25 years ago. It was something of a fight. And yet very little happened over the next 15 years for bike lanes in this city, which is why we all passed the CSO. Now the proposal for bike lanes is encoded in local ordinance and in city planning, and the transition to a multimodal city is underway. I have been biking since before those kids were in our Burley. I didn't even own a car for most of my adult life, and I still bike, like tonight when I came to City Hall. I have enjoyed the expansion of bike lanes. I ride the Brattle Street Garden in Mass Ave all the time. My own kids rode their bikes to CRLS regularly 15 years ago. I wish there had been protected bike lanes then, because they would have started biking to school earlier, as we heard from so many parents today. I bike around as my main mode of transit and experience firsthand the benefits of separate bike lanes. I've been doored. I've had many close calls. I've experienced firsthand the problems of not having separated bike lanes. I fully support the vision of the CSO in installing bike lanes across the city. I know the reason for the proposal and for a timeline was frustration that we didn't, time and time again, get the bike lane expansion that we had hoped for. But because of the success of the CSO timeline, those of us who want a bike lane network across the city have basically won. We must never lose sight of that. We should celebrate it. We've already installed miles of protected bike lanes across the city. And regardless of the vote tonight, that will continue. The only question is whether the network will be completed by 2026 or 2027. We are leaders as a city for bike lanes. No other city in Massachusetts, to my knowledge, has accomplished as much as we have as quickly. Somerville actually has a great vision, far greater than ours, but they don't have the timeline, they don't have the ordinances in place. Boston is working hard, and still we are way ahead. And way ahead of Arlington, which frankly should have separated bike lanes on all of Mass Ave, and Watertown and every other municipality in Massachusetts. We should not lose sight of that success when we deliberate possible adjustments. We owe it to ourselves and our community to come to these discussions with clarity and grace, with balance and respect. When the idea of additional time to change the CSO was discussed over the last couple of years, or scrapping it altogether, which some might want to do, I was clear I would not support taking away the requirement for continuing to advance, and that putting off the full network installation until 2030 I would not support. My understanding from talking with the sponsors of the policy order is that actually the date of 2027 is already something of a compromise. So as I use the bike lanes, I've defended them, I'm glad the city's moving forward, and I also recognize them in public about my concerns about the implementation, including the timetable with little attention to the larger community. Some believe, well, if we're going to do it anyway, then just let's get it done ASAP, rip off that Band-Aid. That would argue for staying with the current timeline. Besides, many advocates point out, this change in sequencing might just be the first attempt at a ban or moratorium. An alternative view is that we are moving forward, and taking 3 years instead of 2 to complete the network will mean less disruption on our roads, and make for better planning, give our staff a chance to spend more time on that, on implementation, and send the message to those in the community upset that we're spending tens of millions of dollars for a relatively small number in percentage terms of people who use the lanes, that we hear their concerns about the pace of change. That would argue for the proposal of sequencing the work on 3 main streets over 3 years instead of 2. When we passed the CSO in the fall of 2020, it was the first ever, and we were and should be proud of that. It has inspired other places to copy us, and yet it was inflexible in ways that led to problems in implementation. Few ordinances that are innovative, groundbreaking laws are perfect, and adjustments should be anticipated. The timeline should have been different from the beginning. The spring timelines, they're problematic because given our summer construction schedule, they weren't really meaningful. It really meant 6 months before. I don't think it was deliberate, but that's what happened. We've learned from implementation. We saw in North Mass Ave that changes were needed. So after the fact, we added back handicap spots. We had flexibility in the bus lanes. We repurposed some spots on side streets as meters for businesses. We adjusted. We continued to push forward with implementation. We learned, and the staff has been great about doing that. We should take the time to do it better for the east side of the city. A phased approach has advantages, not only for small businesses, but for residents across the city who will see that we listen. It would mean more time for all of us, those residents and businesses, to adjust. I want to address concerns that the extension is part of a plan to delay implementation so that a future council can end the CSO. Not for me. Plus, if this proposal passes, construction will still start on all three major arteries under consideration, Cambridge Street, Broadway, and Main Street, in 2025, next year. That puts us well on our way to a completed network and with a clear construction schedule for the remaining mileage. In my opinion, not totally clairvoyant, there's no danger of us not completing the network because stopping construction when we're partway done on those streets seems irresponsible. So if this proposal were only about some parking spots for small businesses, the vote would be easier. Those businesses could get support in other ways, and the bike lanes won't save or destroy them on their own. But it is true that even a few % change in business for some could be a death knell. I have heard from many small business associations and several individual BIPOC small business owners, all of whom asked us to support more flexibility. Among cycling advocates, there is a vision of the 15-minute neighborhood. Within 15 minutes, we should be able to get services, groceries, etc. If our small businesses fail, having a 15-minute neighborhood will be impossible. And there is a danger of that. And yet, it's about more than small businesses. It's about what is best for the city as a whole. We should acknowledge and own that we have ruptured trust among many residents due to the speed with which we've installed the bike lanes in place now. The feelings of exasperation among many residents in the middle, many of whom didn't show up tonight probably because they don't think we're listening. They're neither avid bike advocates or passionately against all bike lanes, is of concern to me. I have deliberately reached out to those walking down the street, talking to neighbors who have no clue that we're even voting on this. And as always, promise to use thoughtful analysis and data in each decision. Some residents want no bike lanes, not me. This proposal is about how long it will take to build the network. And on safety, I reviewed the crash data, and I believe it. I want to note and hope that we can all celebrate that the data show no deaths and almost no serious injuries for cyclists for the last 10 years on the streets we'll be installing, which doesn't mean there haven't been crashes, and we heard loud and clear in testimony tonight. And yet we are, and we should celebrate, we're an incredibly safe city, and will be even more so as we build more lanes. I, perhaps unlike others, do not take issue with the crash data or dismiss the testimony we heard tonight. The point, though, is we're already doing well, and I look forward to continued efforts to provide safe transit across the city. And I'm grateful for the hard work of safety advocates across the city that have resulted in this really great safety data we have. It was heartening to hear from so many advocates who make the point that more biking will lead to fewer emissions and help in our climate goals. I invite them all to stay engaged, since we made incredibly difficult decisions last year around emission pollution that will have 10 times the impact of bike use. I'm wrapping up. Bike lanes.
Counselor, our meeting expires in 15 minutes.
I'm almost done.
No, let's get done because you're there.
So I think it's important to make the point that we also have clear data that the usage of the lanes is below where it should be. 3 times as many cars as bicycles commute and show up in recent vehicle counts. So if my vote was based on what was best for me personally and politically, it's crystal clear I would vote no. Many people urging us to reject any change in timeline are people who supported me, and many are personal friends. And I am under no illusion that the people most in favor of a change in timeline did not support me. This vote is hard, but I will not vote on my personal interest. I will vote based on what I believe, having taken time to listen and review information, data, and proposals on what is best for the city as a whole. And I believe allowing the city to take up until November of 2027 is a reasonable compromise. So I will be voting yes.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nolan yields the floor. Councilor Wilson, do you want to speak to this? Councilor Wilson's with the bid.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you to the residents, to everyone who spoke in public comment today. I know that that is not easy, not only bringing young people out and staying up past their bedtimes and so much more, but being able to speak about a passionate issue like this that is impacting so many across our city. I just want to thank each and every one. I do want to also thank my co-sponsors on this very thoughtful and policy order that is being misconstrued, which is not fair. But I will speak to the fact that, what we heard in public testimony tonight does not necessarily speak to all of the emails that we have received across over the last several weeks. Additionally, those people who are just often left behind because they don't have the access to come into City Hall or to send that email. And that's what's been happening along the way. There are high risks for people, hardships, and just so much more. And it is important that we look into what a mitigation plan will look like for our city, because I think a city like Cambridge owes that to all of our residents, all of our stakeholders, business owners, and everyone else who passes through our city to be, doing their business. More needs to be done to meet people where they are. And I know that through this policy order, we are going to be able to do that. Over the weekend, I was able to talk to many residents, especially in the Port neighborhood, who would be greatly impacted by the Main Street installation, and those who also attend my church at Union Baptist Church. And being able to talk to them, along with a young woman who lives in Newtown Court, who I mentor, we were able to get over 77 signatures of folks who are in favor of this policy order to extend, to look into parking mitigation, to really think about how we are making the best use of city resources for city users. This is not a one-size-fits-all, so I appreciate the back and forth, the dialogue, and recognize that in support of this policy order, as my colleagues have already stated, does not say that bike lanes are not important, that the safety of our residents are not important, because they are. What this also says is that we want to look into making sure that businesses can thrive and survive, and that we are doing all that we can in our city for all. So I want to thank you all, and I yield, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Council Wilson yields the floor. Council Toner.
Madam Mayor, motion to extend the meeting by 10 minutes
How about
till
15?
12:10. Oh, it's 15? You want 15? All right, 12:15.
Actually, I wanted 12:30, but
Okay.
I'll-
You want
12.
12:30?
There's too much to go through. 12:30 if we don't need it.
All right, 12:30,
Okay,
12:30.
thank you. So on a motion by Councilor Toner to extend the meeting to 12:30, roll call.
Councillor Azeem.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Nolan. Yes. Councillor Pickett.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Toner.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Wilson.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Simmons.
Yes,
Yes. Madam Mayor, 9 members have voted yes.
thank you. And the meeting is extended to 12:30 a.m. by the affirmative vote of 7 members. We now go, Councilor Wilson has yielded the floor. We now come to Councilor Pickett. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor. From the installations on North and Mid-Mass Ave, I think we learned a lesson that it is better to anticipate and mitigate problems up front rather than undertake damage control and fix the problems after the fact. And we have the perfect opportunity to apply that by approving policy order number 50. I have heard, as many others have, from our small business community and residents who have no off-street parking options, that this transition is going to be very difficult for them, and they're asking for our help and support. As others have said, we received many letters and calls over the weekend about this issue. And so we're in a very unique position because, unlike prior installations, we now have a potential solution that is going to help smooth the transition. By allowing the zoning amendments to be put in place prior to removing parking caused by the installation of the bike lanes, the council is offering support to our business community and residents. The maps provided in the city manager's report clearly shows there's a large number of private parking locations throughout Cambridge. They're not evenly distributed, but they're there, that could help mitigate concern and help those that have already lost parking. And if only a few of them agree to open up their parking facilities as a result of rezoning, it can have a positive impact for our residents and businesses. For those this evening that said the city is not doing enough to protect cyclists, the city already has installed and has under construction, with a 2024 completion date, 16.5 miles of separated bike lanes, including those on Hampshire Street, Mass Ave, and there's new bike infrastructure on Gore Street, all those streets that run parallel to Cambridge Street, Main Street, and Broadway. The Cycling Safety Ordinance requires 2.5 miles per year to be installed. So clearly the city has installed more than what is required. The policy order asks for an extension. It is not asking for the work of other bike lane installations to stop. It's not asking for the planning to stop for other installations. So as I look at this in the broader context, approving policy order number 50 makes sense. It is reasonable and thoughtful and balances the implementation of safe biking infrastructure with the concerns of our businesses and residents. And for that reason, I will be supporting, obviously, policy order number 50.
Thank you,
I
Council.
yield the floor.
Council Pickett yields the floor for the discussion. I'm going to go to Council Sabina Wheeler, Azeem, then back to you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll try to be brief because it feels like one of those nights where a lot of folks in public comment and made the points I wanted to make, told the story I wanted to tell, and that's, I lost part of 2 teeth in a bike crash in Cambridge. Like a lot of folks we heard from didn't report that. It doesn't show up in the statistics. It cost me thousands of dollars, even with dental insurance. I biked to the council meeting tonight. It's my primary mode of getting around in Cambridge, but I didn't start as a huge cyclist in the city. Bicycling was just the most practical way to commute to my job. I lived in an apartment where I couldn't afford parking, definitely couldn't afford a parking spot at work. Biking was how I got through Harvard Square. And just the other quick story of, I biked this past weekend, a couple different sort of city council related events on Hampshire Street. Great experience, very easy to get around, very easy to stop and say hi to people, stop at local businesses. A few days ago, last week, I biked on Cambridge Street. Just very different experience. It was to get to our city council training at the Foundry, had to stop at a local business on Cambridge Street, had an errand to do at Keezer's, and just a very terrifying experience where a car stops in front of you, has to get into a space, you go around. It's a sort of harrowing experience as compared to a place like Cambridge Street now, where we have protected bike lanes, and just night and day. I'm really sympathetic to some of the concerns we hear. I think a big part of what we do at the council is policy change, and I'm always conscious of the fact that change is hard. It's why I voted for the PTDM changes at our meeting last week, or the previous council meeting, I should say, to talk about mitigation. I can't vote for delay. I know it's going to lead to more stories like mine and the folks in public comment, more lost teeth, more broken bones, more ambulance rides, more potential fatalities. I think the last time we talked about this, I said, there just aren't a lot of things that come before the council where you can say this has the potential to save a life, and this is one of them. And I don't know how I vote for something that could potentially, cause a life to be lost. So I'm going to be a no on this. But I'll yield back.
Thank you, Council Sabina Wheeler yields the floor. Council Azeem, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, everyone's made points on the bike lanes already, so I won't repeat those. I just had 2 separate points that I wanted to make. The first, I think we've been talking a lot about changes to our PTDM and how we do parking in the city to allow for shared parking. I just wanted to say that, obviously that change still needs to be done to allow shared parking, but part of the pre-work that was done last term was that previously, parking was tied to uses because of minimum parking requirements. And when we were removing them last term, there was a lot of fear and consternation that would lead to less parking and all those sorts of things. And now instead we're relying on that to get the shared parking and to better use our parking. And I just bring that up as an example in that I know that zoning changes are scary, but zoning is extremely prescriptive. And these changes that people who were worried about parking last time were, anxious about not supporting can now rely on them to kind of give them a little bit of what they're wanting. And so just saying that as a thing of flexibility in our zoning code is really, really valuable. And then, secondly, I just wanted to say, I think it looks like this will pass and, we're going to do this in phases. And I would just say that, as my colleagues are saying, that we can do a better implementation. I'm excited to be a part of that conversation as we kind of go forward, and being kind of brought in. I think that, if we're putting Cambridge Street into chunks. There certainly are chunks that are more dangerous than others. Like I think that Windsor and Cambridge Street is particularly brought up. And I think that being a part of those conversations, whatever those smaller groups look like, about how we're going to prioritize going forward and how we're going to do this phasing is something that I would really like to be in. And I would say that, prioritizing the most dangerous sections and going to those first would be really, really helpful.
Councillor Azeem, you're yielding the floor. Councillor Azeem yields the floor. Vice Mayor McGovern, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Extension of time, delay, tomato. Bottom line is this. When this passes, we will essentially be endorsing scenario 2 in the city's report, which puts completion out to 2027 instead of 2026. So you can call it an extension of time. Other people can call it a delay. It is what it is. I have a lot I could say, but in the spirit of time, and I know how this is going, so I won't. But I did, and I'm sorry for having written, I usually don't write out my stuff, but my brain is a little mush right now, so please bear with me. I'll be quick. So we heard many moving stories tonight from people who live or work in Cambridge who fear for their safety. What stood out for me were the testimonies of those who were doored and fell into the street, because they reminded me of what happened to my son. A few weeks after Amanda Phillips was doored, fell into the street, and killed by an oncoming truck, my son was doored just a few blocks away from where that tragedy took place. He too fell into the street. He was lucky. He was lucky that no truck was coming. People's safety shouldn't rely on luck. And we can say, though, the accidents weren't that bad and it's only been 5 people and so many. All of that is luck. A car going 5 miles an hour faster, the results could be different. A person landing on their head instead of their arm, the results could be different. A truck coming down the street, and my son could have been dead. I believe that bike lanes increase safety. I believe that bike lanes are necessary. We offered a substitute that would have given everyone a win, but it didn't pass. So unfortunately, this is going to come down to some people feeling like they won and others feeling like they lost. I know how this is going to go tonight, and there's nothing I can say that's going to change that, but I cannot vote against infrastructure that I believe increases safety. Let's mitigate the loss of parking all we can. We all support that. But let's do it within the current timeline, because I, for one, just don't want to keep my fingers crossed for another 18 extra months. I will be voting no.
Vice Mayor, you yielding the floor. Further discussion? Let me just say something briefly. I certainly want to thank my colleagues for weighing in on this. What I want to say tonight is nothing that I have not said before, but it's worth repeating. I fully support, and the City Council really supports bicycle safety and an infrastructure. It's often hard to hear that we don't support bicycle safety, because I know I do. It might not look the way some people want it to look, but I certainly want everyone to be safe. And when I say I want everyone to be safe, I have to think about senior citizens who were conspicuously absent from this meeting, in part because they can't get out late at night, or they don't want to. They feel very unheard. I just recently had a meeting with over 30 senior citizens, and we were talking about something else, but of course the conversation of bikes came into the conversation. And the big thing that they always say over and over is, we don't feel safe, but most importantly is we don't feel heard. And I'm talking about not only senior citizens, but people that have disabilities that can't get around and can't get out. We are the City Council for all the citizens: cyclists, pedestrians, senior citizens, people of color. And I often say this, and I want to say it again, we have to make sure we're representing the broadest range of opinions, and who's not in the room, and who is never in the room. And it is our job to reach out and speak to those people and engage them in the process. No one wants to see anyone get hurt, nor has this council, I don't believe, ever even written a policy order that said we don't support bicycle safety. So I just ask for for grace from everyone, to lean in and not pull back. This evening, although it was probably one of our longest public comments, or came close to it, one thing I can certainly remark that it was very civil. People came, they said their piece, they stayed, they left, but people were polite, and that's important. That's important because some people might now want to come because they feel like they'll be respected when they come here. People won't be engaged if they don't feel respected. We can disagree, we don't have to be disagreeable. So I'm very pleased on how public comment went today, and I hope as we continue this conversation, that same tone and tenor will continue. You know, I often say that we have to consider everyone's welfare and point of view, and we're going to have to get to what I call the unhappy medium. Everybody doesn't walk away with something that they feel like they should have, but they have to give to get. And I certainly appreciate your point of view, Vice Mayor. I think this policy order that was offered by my colleagues, Toner, Pickett, and Wilson, does strike the right balance, and that's why I'm standing behind it and support it. And I had the ability would have been added to it because I feel that strongly about it. We have to speak for all people. So I'm going to yield the floor. If there's no further discussion, I will ask for the roll by the clerk. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
On adoption of the policy order, Councillor Azeem.
No.
No. Vice Mayor McGovern.
No.
No. Councillor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Pickett.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Siddiqui.
No.
No. Councillor Sabrina Wheeler.
No.
No. Councillor Toner.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Wilson.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Madam Mayor, 5 members have voted yes and 4 members have voted no.
And the policy order passes with the majority vote of